Hey guys, in today's video, we're going to be going over the discussion and recommendation section of the IMRaDR report. Um, and we'll talk about specifically what I expect to be in the discussion section, what I expect in the recommendation section. We'll look at a number of examples, and then we'll also talk about what I expect in the draft this weekend versus what I expect in, the actual final project. Do be advised that it is a quick next couple of weeks. We've got our discussion and recommendation sections due this weekend. You've already written part of the decision or part of the method section, hopefully a good portion of the results section. And so then this weekend you'll do the discussion section, the recommendation section. And I hope you guys can kind of see the way that we've built this course. It looks like, oh wow, like they're forcing us to do a lot of work. We have so many things due every weekend, but a lot of it is just draft stuff to make sure that you're on task so that once you get here on December 5th, you don't have to actually like do all of this work that you've actually been thinking about this research for many, many weeks since here, right? And so you've been thinking about it since week 9, doing your research since weeks 10 and 11, and then working on the actual writing in these few weeks here. Okay. If you haven't already, I expect you definitely need to if you haven't, but watch the videos that we did last week on the methods and results and the graphics as well. Make sure you check out that graphics video too. All right, let's dive into our content here. Let's start with PowerPoint. All right. So, discussion section. There are certain things that I require in the different sections. With the methods, I've told you guys some very specifics that I expect out of you. The data analysis section with the triangulation of data, the problem-solving model, decision matrix with an explanation of the decision matrix concepts in there. All of that is required in your actual methods section. In your discussion section, I do require other things, but it's a little bit more amorphous. It's a little bit more, you have a little bit more options and leeway and choices in design and structure and even content, okay, to some extent. But these are the key components. You're going to interpret your results. You're going to consider your weaknesses. You're going to look at broader implications and future prospects, okay? Part of this is answering your research question, which is often one of the biggest features of your research. Our research is a little bit different, but still we're going to answer our research question, usually in our discussion section as well. So what do I want? Now, this will not necessarily be for every single, well, for most students, you're going to answer your research question within the first paragraph of the discussion section. And so what you want to do is you want to have a bit of an intro paragraph for your discussion section where you quickly answer your research question, you quickly get into the information. Don't spend a whole lot of time on superficial, unnecessary phrases, welcoming us to the discussion section or anything like that. Get right to the content, right to the information. And yeah, within that first paragraph, you're going to kind of build up, and we'll look at some examples, but you're going to answer your research question within that first paragraph, okay? You're also going to, this is the interpretation of results section. Does it have to be called interpretation of results? It doesn't. It's up to you on what you call it, if you even have a subheading. Some people have subheadings in certain sections and some people don't. It kind of depends on how much information you have and how easy it is to break up the information. And so really, you're using a lot more rhetoric to just kind of consider what is most effective rhetorically, all right? So for our interpretation of results, like I said, it's all about answering that research question based off of your findings, of your secondary research and your primary research. You might mention whether or not these findings were expected or unexpected, but mainly you're turning data into knowledge. That's the main thing with the discussion section. With the results, with the methods section, we figure out what we're doing. With the results section, you're going to list the actual answers, right? The results that you came to. So if it's an interview, you'll mention some of the more important. Not all the results go in the results section, only the most important results. All the other results will go in an appendix, right? Um, and so you'll list the most important results in the results section, and then in the discussion section, you'll analyze and tell us what it means, right? So like it's one thing to say that there was high levels of um, arsenic in the water supply, right? That's results. That's information. It's another thing to say that we need to um, vote someone out of office because they didn't take care of the water supply, or, and this connects to the broader implications. Um, you know, if our results say that there was poison in the water, and our research question was, is the water, dangerous, or in what ways is it dangerous to humans? Then we can explain the poisonous nature. But the broader implications could be about the politics of it. It could be how someone maybe was voted into office that didn't put in the work that they needed to keep the water clean. It could be about what we need to do moving forward with the water, of like, okay, well, we need to shut it off. Or if there is poison in the water, broader implications could talk about like the mortality rates and how many people are going to die. And so there are a lot of different ways that you can kind of expand and go broader, and it sort of depends a little bit on your research. All right. I'm going to add a section here on key components. Analysis of decision matrix and solutions. So this section might be somewhere, anywhere in the report. Again, there is no rule on what it's supposed to be called, but we also need a section that explains the decision matrix as well. Okay, and analyzes, not just explains. So the results section will explain. All right, we'll look at some examples. So we hit that one, the main interpretation of results, answering your research questions, turning the data into knowledge. Okay, what does it mean? Consideration of weaknesses. This is another section that you should include in your discussion section. It's maybe one of the it's important, but not as important as other sections. Like this is probably the most important section right here. I would say that this is quite important section too, the analysis of the decision matrix and solutions. Consideration of weaknesses, though, looking at your study objectively. This is something that students don't quite understand. Not all students fully understand this concept coming into this class, and they have this idea from 150. You've all taken 150, so you've all had to write an annotated bibliography. In this annotated bibliography, you have to often evaluate the sources' credibility as information. And one thing I noticed a lot with students is they would often overhype the credibility of authors and talk about how amazing they were, right? This person has a PhD and they did this research and they know all these things and they're from this school. So they have to be ethical. They have to be, it has to be a solid source. And what we find is that that isn't always the case. That's not always true. Okay. And what's more interesting is that students think that I want to hear this. Students think that I want to hear that their research is amazing, that the secondary research they found is perfect, right? There's not a single problem. Everything is perfect about it. When in reality, I know that there is no perfect research, right? Everyone's biased. We all make mistakes. Now, if you have a PhD, you're definitely more likely to do research correctly versus someone who doesn't have a PhD. But that doesn't, in and of itself, mean that you have credibility, right? So basically, what I'm getting at here is you need to be open to critiquing yourself and being critical of yourself in this section of consideration of weaknesses. And in so doing, you're not going to get a worse grade. Okay, by saying, this is what happened, this is what happened, you're not necessarily going to get a worse grade. If it's something that negatively affects your research, you can lose points, but I'm likely going to see that thing even if you don't mention it here. Okay. And so I will say that, and I'll leave it up to you guys on how you want to interpret that information. But like, for example, one thing that students like to do is they like to say that their research is a weakness because it was qualitative, right? This is not really a weakness because it is qualitative research. Shouldn't be discriminated against based off of what it is. Does that make sense? So it is supposed to be qualitative research. Qualitative research is supposed to be qualitative, right? It's not supposed to be quantitative. And so saying our research has a weakness because it's qualitative doesn't quite fit, right? Um, I think something that would be better there than saying that is a future prospect would be to do quantitative research. So if you do think quantitative research would benefit from it, then that doesn't have to be a shortcoming or a weakness, but it can just be a future prospect of like, we need to do quantitative research. Now, don't just say that. Like, if that's true, then say it, right? Broader implications, I sort of already hit on this, but you're going to connect and you're going to relate to the broader field, whether it's broader studies, scholars, seminal research, solutions that people have been implementing across the world, concepts like this. And again, we'll look at examples here. Okay. Like I said, future prospects. This is what needs to be done now. Okay, now that you've done all this research, you've spent 5 or 6 weeks researching. What more do we need to do to figure out new information, to figure out solutions, to understand this problem better? Like, what would be a good step? What would be good steps forward? You've likely thought about this of like, oh man, I wish I could do this and this and this, right? We don't need a conclusion, all right? Mainly because conclusions are used sometimes and sometimes they're not. It's sometimes used if it's a really lengthy discussion section. Sometimes a capital C section is included, like an IMRaDR at the end. We are going to be doing a recommendation section, which is a sort of a conclusion, okay? But we're not going to have a conclusion in the discussion section. So you'll include these sections that I've mentioned. Before I go into language and hedging, the other section that I didn't write about is the one that I wrote in, analysis of decision matrix and solutions. We'll look at that, but essentially what you need to do along with our problem solving model, in the introduction, we need to prove that it's a problem, that this isn't actually an issue. In the method section, we're going to detail our methods to show our list of investigative steps and our ethos and credibility as researchers. In the results section, we're going to list the results, including the decision matrix. And then in the discussion section, apart from all of these other things, we now need to actually analyze the decision matrix and the solutions and mention why it is the one won and the others lost. Okay. Certain things you won't have to explain and certain things you will. And we'll talk about that in a second. Okay. And so these are, generally speaking, the types of information that we're looking for. Do you have to name them in that exact way? No, you don't. Okay, you don't have to name it in that exact way. The interpretation of results section can be something called completely different, or it can be called nothing. It doesn't have to have a subheading. Okay, subheadings are helpful in highlighting information and filtering information. If you want to use them, please do. if you find that it will help your reader, go for it. Okay. But we need a interpretation of results section. We need to consider our weaknesses, broader implications. Broader implications can technically be connected to other things. Okay. So it could have its own section. It might not. Maybe it's connected to this. All right. I think oftentimes broader implications is connected to decision matrix and solutions. And so maybe it's just those two sections are combined. And then, of course, future prospects. Okay. Language. Use past tense for research findings and past actions. Use past tense for analysis and things that are still true. So if it's still true today, you can use present tense. And then just make sure that you're hedging. Okay. So you want to be careful with how you treat your information. Because you surveyed 10 people and asked them what their opinion on student stress is, you now can't say that it's a fact that every student struggles with student stress, right? Do you guys understand that the hedging issue there? Hedges are rhetorical devices, right? So like it is likely, the data suggests, it is possible. It might be interpreted as things like this, okay? It's uses of language that regulate the strength of the claim, of how strong this claim should be. And so in your discussion section, you do need to take responsibility for your claims and your solutions through hedging through hedging words, depending on how strong it is. Okay, so just make sure that you're aware of that. And then we have some more information if you want to read up more on the discussion section. Let's go ahead and you know what? Let's go ahead and end the video here on the discussion section, and then we'll jump into the recommendation section, and then we'll look at a few different examples.